Metrobank are proud to be supporting the Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly podcast throughout all our Ashes coverage. As the official champion of women's and girls cricket in England and Wales, they're wishing England the best of luck and cheering on their inspirational players from home. Keep your eyes peeled next week for a special Ashes competition from Metrobank. Australia are 4-0 up and are potentially 2 games away from retaining the Ashes. They've not necessarily been at their best with the bat, but it's been good enough so far. For England, how can they get back in the series, and how much will they rue a pair of missed opportunities in the opening 2 games? I'm Yas Rana, and with me today are Katya Witney and Ben Gardner. Katya, how frustrated do you think England will be after those first 2 games? Because they were in them both, especially in the second, falling short in that chase of 181.
Yeah, I think very frustrated. I mean, we talked about it a lot yesterday, but the match yesterday feels like the bigger missed opportunity. It was a match that they were in right to the end. It was the one that Australia didn't play, or played the worst that they had played out of the 2 in. They definitely gave them opportunities. It was a subpar batting performance that really was saved by Elise Perry making that 60 that turned out to be a match-winning effort. And also the manner of the defeat. I mean, there was a lot of stuff spoken at the end about Amy Jones's management of the strike. And there was the Charlie Dean shot as well that we talked about quite a lot yesterday. So I think yesterday will be the more disappointing one, but in terms of how they've performed outside of the result, I think they'll be more disappointed at that. In terms of the shots some of the batting unit have played to get out, and in terms of as a collective, I think they'll be quite disappointed that not just that it's 4-0, but the manner of which that it is 4-0.
Ben, do you think England are singing off the same hymn sheet in the batting department? After the game, Heather Knight spoke about the team needing to be braver with the bat, which is not what you necessarily hear from a captain when their team falls short in a low-scoring run chase. But speaking to the press after the game, Alice Capsey, who was part of what you'd say was England's best partnership yesterday, she talked about how her plan with Amy Jones was that they saw the game as one partnership here, England win the game because the run rate was in control. Yes, the required run rate was going up whilst they were together, but it was never more than 4.5, close-ish to 5 and over, but not quite at 5 and over. Capsey falls, and then 6 balls into Charlie Dean's innings. Dean's is out playing what, if the series goes really badly for England, I think that'll be the moment of the series that will really be, or that might sum it up. She plays the scoop shot off a 40-mile-per-hour ball miles outside off stump. And it feels like the players are trying to do different things, because Capsey wasn't necessarily saying that in that moment England needed to be braver. But it feels like there's almost an implicit criticism of the way in which Capsey and Jones went about things, even though that was England's most productive partnership in the game.
Yeah, and I think this actually goes back to the first game as well, where if you look at the manner of the wickets that fell in that, the batting performance, you had Heather Knight kind of trying to put that bravery into practice, England having got to a decent position, but then her, hitting to deep mid-wicket. And then actually the other senior player in Nat Brunt doing the same thing sort of a few balls later. That shows 2 players who are kind of joined up in that thinking. And then, as you say, with Capsey, that shows something different. I guess there's quite a lot of things to unpack here, actually.
Yeah, the theory with the Capsey thing was that England let Australia settle into their lengths too much. This is the theory that even though Capsey and Jones were going about their business in a relatively calm way, what they needed to do is apply a bit of pressure back to Australia, and if they hit a couple of boundaries, then the singles would have been easy to come by.
Yeah, which and
is the theory.
There is definitely, there's definitely merit to that thinking. I guess a few things that I would say is, one, there can be sort of like shades of light and dark in this, that like you can have sort of a general team philosophy, but you can also approach the situation with what you think it deserves and kind of empower your players to do that. I get that if you're sitting in the dressing room and you're out and you're looking at the people in the middle and thinking like they're losing us the game here, basically is what they might well have been thinking there. That can be an incredibly frustrating position to be in. But I think you've also got to trust that you've picked these players for a reason, and that's not just that like the talent that they can have, but it's also kind of the reading of the game that they can have as well. I guess that if you're out there, you will just see it differently to how it is in the middle. The only person who truly knows what it's like batting, how easy it is going to be to take those risks, are the 2 that are out there. And you had, a more senior player in Amy Jones playing in a similar sort of fashion, so it wasn't as if it was just Capsey
100%.
at that point. I guess there's also there's this factor like so England have their game plan. Obviously, you can question whether it's the right game plan. They get bowled out a lot these days. When they don't, they generally go on to score a lot of runs. But we saw it even in the South Africa series. They had an innings that was not dissimilar to the first ODI here, where I think they were in a decent position. Maybe a bit of a recovery later on, but just can't get up. Like basically, they're almost shooting for a big total and not getting a par total. You had Lauren Bell say after the first ODI, well, actually, we felt like we could have defended 250 at the end of the game, but England were kind of on course for 250 when Nat Brunt plays a really aggressive shot, which is the shot you're playing if you think you need to get 300 kind of thing.
Same with Tammy Beaumont's dismissal. She was scoring slowly, but England were going at 5 and over at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but I almost think the most maybe fundamental thing, and there were tricky batting conditions yesterday. That is true, and you do sometimes see these sort of great ODI rearguard partnerships where you score really slowly, you absorb a lot of pressure and you hit back. But I think that maybe England's biggest thing is actually what is their kind of like, can they find that natural tempo that gets them up to a good score? Because actually, ODI cricket, if you have to take lots of risks to score runs, you are going to get bowled out a lot because like
50 overs is a really long time.
Exactly, yeah.
We'll come on to this later, especially in regards to how Elise Perry played. But Katya, do you think there is a sense of muddle thinking, not just from the not directly contradictory things that Capsey and Knight said yesterday, but also just the contradiction in how two young players played that particular moment, in Capsey seeing it alongside Amy Jones, as Ben says, as one big partnership, take your time, that can win you the game, versus Charlie Dean, who we've really bigged up as a potential, maybe even number 7 for England with the bat, plays... A lot of people were talking about Amy Jones at the end and mismanaging the strike, and if you want to hear us talk about that, we talked about that yesterday. But for me, the Dean shot was so much worse. That was... I cannot think what she was trying to do. It was a show of aggression almost for the sake of being aggressive. That was so far off being the percentage option, given that was Alana King's last over as well, even forgetting what the type of delivery it was.
I mean, even if you think about who Charlie Dean actually is as a batter, that's not the type of shot that Charlie Dean plays. We've talked about Charlie Dean potentially being promoted up the order in ODIs before, precisely because she is the type of batter who can manage a situation like that and who can build the kind of innings that England needed in that scenario, which kind of makes the shot even more confusing. And hypothetically, we don't know, if this is what's said, we don't know if Charlie Dean was told to come out and move the scoring rate on, or whether that's just how she saw it, or whether that shot was a freak reaction to something. But if she was, it kind of does show a bit of muddled thinking, but almost more a lack of being able to adapt to those conditions, or being able to think about what those conditions need. So if you think about the difference, I mean, you said that Amy Jones and Alice Capsey were out there together and they were scoring at a similar rate. And it almost comes down to how England view Alice Capsey as a player, that she is that number 7 who they want to come in and they want to be fast scoring. And when she was dropped for that South Africa series originally, John Lewis cited that he wanted her to be that player, that number 7 in ODIs who comes in and really moves on the striking rate like she's meant to in T20s when she comes in at number 3. And she hadn't been doing that. And the kind of the criticism nature of Alice Capsey comes back to that, of her not playing that natural game, or not being as aggressive rather than reading the situation. And that kind of shows a lack of being able to adapt to what that situation needed. It didn't need Capsey to come in at number 7 and move the scoring rate on and inject pace into the game. It needed her to come in and absorb that pressure and build a partnership with Amy Jones that would have seen them to the end of the game. I guess you can call it muddled thinking, but if anything, it's a lack of being able to adapt to the circumstances that they found themselves in. And that's been a common theme with England over the last year or so, I reckon. And well, what's worrying is it doesn't seem to be getting any better. It's the same with the pressure thing, that they were put under a lot of pressure yesterday, and having drawn a line in the sand after the West Indies game, clearly that line in the sand hasn't been drawn if they've just capitulated under pressure again. So it's just this common theme that's a bit worrying more than anything else.
No, absolutely. I think I'd recommend people to watch an 8-minute video on the Cricket Australia website. It's the press conference. I think they do this for every press conference. It's the full press conference that Alice Capsey did after the game. And I was watching it thinking, what did a different game of cricket happen? They spend half... Obviously, Capsey was put up because she bowled really well. She takes three wickets. But half of the press conference is about, essentially, did they go hard enough? And I'm like, they failed to chase 180 because they lost their first 5 wickets for less than half of the runs they needed to require. It is as simple as that. I found the chat around scoring rates absurd, because that is not why England lost the game. And yeah, Ben, you mentioned England batting first. Since the 2023 Ashes, England have batted 50 overs, the full 50 overs, in just three of the 8 times they batted first in ODI cricket. And someone like Heather Knight, who's got an amazing ODI record, she's not actually passed 50 since the last Ashes series in ODI cricket, and this is her format, really. You mentioned the importance of being able to score in a risk-free way, but still doing it quite quickly. Katya mentioned the Elise Perry knock. That is the knock of the second ODI. She scores a reasonably brisk 60 odd, and that allows Australia to even get up to 180 in the end. What is it about Perry and players like her who are able to do that?
So I think the key really is there's two things, but the main thing I think is actually strike rotation, really. I think that, especially in women's ODI cricket still, that is just the key to batting in the middle overs. And that's why, Perry, for a long time, there's like ridiculous record where she wasn't getting hundreds, but she was getting 50s like basically 2 out of every 3 times she batted, because she could just score at that natural rate so easily. And actually, like, it's interesting because we can sometimes think of running between the wickets as being really good at calling or being really fast at running. And actually a lot of it is about like you can play almost the same shot and one of them gets you a single and one of them gets you a dot ball, basically.
It's basically strike rate of decent balls.
Yes, yeah.
It's like, can you strike at 70 off balls where the bowler is like, I've done nothing wrong?
Exactly, yeah. And that never makes a highlights package. It's the kind of thing, it just happens. You score 4 off an over and everyone just like, you kind of shake hands on it, but do you get 4 off the over or do you get 2 off the over kind of thing? And that is, what has made Perry in particular probably out of almost all batsmen in women's cricket history so good. That has been her specifically extreme strength, and she has made a career as one of the greatest of all time doing it, basically. I guess we've also talked quite a lot about just batting in this game, and I thought some of the bowling was from both sides was just excellent as well. Like obviously it's not at all the story, but how England came back with the ball in the second ODI was so good. Like Australia they were 130 for 2, and actually Capsey bowling that well is interesting. And like I really liked the ball that got Ash Gardner. I almost thought her fingers almost came round the side of it, and the seam was kind of like horizontal, so it kind of seemed to. I think Ash Gardner didn't know what it was doing. Basically, like it sort of was going a few different ways, and then kind of goes on with the arm, but it goes through the gate and takes off stump. It's also an interesting situation where England obviously it is the same team. I don't think we've got an update on Kate Cross's fitness, but there's also Sarah Glenn in the squad. Charlie Dean didn't have the best day with the ball yesterday, and if they're and Capsey has improved with the ball quite significantly. She bowled well in the Big Bash, and we're talking about her. Dean is maybe following England's instructions with the bat, whereas Capsey hasn't. But also Capsey doing the job with the ball that Dean couldn't do yesterday. It was interesting. And then Alana King is just such a good bowler.
Well, the conditions have just been very different to how everyone has sort of predicted them to be. I mean, people writing that the players are said to be shocked at the amount of turn, actually. And that does change things quite a lot for the series, because we've seen spin playing such a big part already. Ash Gardner had a brilliant game in the first. And yeah, you're right. Capsey's 3-fer, and it's a proper 3-fer as well. All set players, all big name players, and getting a lot of turn. Capsey actually said yesterday that if she can rag it, anyone can. When we were just talking about the pitches, and yeah, Katya, Ben is right to highlight just how well Australia and England have bowled actually in the series so far. I mean, I've been really impressed by Kim Garth. I think she's bowled with real threat. And has probably bowled slightly better than her figures have suggested. Lauren Bell bowled really well in the first game, and Alana King is just amazing. I find it amazing she can't even get in to the T20 side at the moment. In ODI cricket, she's got 25 wickets at 11 since the start of last year, and of bowlers who've only ever played in the 21st century with more than 50 ODI wickets, she's got the best average ever. Actually, no, second best average. So yeah, King is just brilliant.
Yeah, she's amazing, and she was amazing yesterday. It's worth just speaking a little bit about the hat-trick ball she was on that wasn't a hat-trick ball. I've seen so many worse deliveries than that take hat-tricks than that ball, because that ball was amazing and it went straight past and straight through.
It was too good, wasn't it? Too good, yeah.
It was far, far too good, especially to Lauren Filer. But yeah, no, she bowled really, really well, and even when she wasn't taking wickets, particularly in that end spell, kind of the spell around the Charlie Dean dismissal and just after, she was completely unplayable. And she bowled really, really well. I also think just on England coming back from 130 for 2, was it? And then all out. I think the seamers didn't get quite enough credit because obviously Capsy was the key, but I think Lauren Bell and Lauren Filer bowled pretty well yesterday. We talked about Lauren Filer falling over a lot, but outside falling over and bowling beamers because she was falling over, she was actually bowling some very, very good balls. The ball that she bowled Talia McGrath with was really, really good, and Lauren Bell also bowled incredibly well yesterday. So England seamers also should get some credit around that too.
That's classic Violet McGrath wicket. Have we called her Lauren Fowler yet?
No, not yet. I got very confused yesterday when I said that Australia got off to a flyer because Filer couldn't get her feet sorted. We're talking about conditions. I think and I think this is a big if because the next ODI is at Hobart, which is not necessarily a spin bowling paradise. I think if it does continue to play like that, I think you just change who your fifth bowler is. Like pick the same team, Caps is your fifth bowler, not Siva Brunt, basically. If you're trying to find positives, Ben, how do England? What are reasons for England to feel positive?
Well, the thing is, I think there are some. Like I think that the first game, you can kind of say that Australia sort of had England at arm's length through most of it. It wasn't quite as close as maybe it looked at the end, sort of thing. But the second game, like that is just a close game of cricket. And England, last time out for the ODIs, okay, England, I think, had Australia out for 205 in the first game, but then, didn't get that close chasing it and then were bad with the bat the next 2 times. So they've already kind of, in some ways, I think, outperformed the last ODI series out here. And if you look at the last 5 ODIs that they've played against Australia, going back to the start of the 2023 series, they've won 2 of them, had some close games, had some, had some good wins, had some close defeats. Like actually, Australia are still obviously the best ODI side in the world, and England had Capsy not got out when she did, had maybe even had Amy Jones in that moment not happened right at the end with the strike rotation. We might be looking here at a 1-1 series and a series that's fully alive. And then also I think, what we saw from that 2023 series is just how actually it's right to talk about England's pressure problem, but actually they also in that series showed themselves to be a pretty resilient team actually, to come from quite a lot of points when like after a game they might have thought, well, we're basically out of it now, and to come back time and again, it feels like they're kind of like they're sort of out of it. But if they win the next ODI, then actually they're sort of they're still in with a chance basically, and they will think that they've shown that they can threaten Australia with the ball, and they will feel confident that with Knight, Siva Brunt, Beaumont, Jones actually that's what highest score against Australia yesterday in any format. They've shown that they know they have the players with the bat, and they've shown that they can cause a threat with the ball. And it's kind of just piecing it all together, settling on that game plan, and as Katya has said, sort of handling the pressure. But I think it's funny because it's been a very entertaining series so far, and it also could be over in a few days' time.
Yeah.
Just on a purely points-based thing, it's also worth remembering just how powerful the test is, and with it being last, if England go into that with the series still alive, i.e. Australia haven't reached 8 points, it probably could go either way. Like I don't think there is an out and out. You'd say Australia are the favourites for that test, but I don't think they're an out and out favourite with the nature of how women's tests are played. I.e. how few of them are. There's never really a favourite going into these kinds of test matches, particularly between like the big 4 sides. England have just come off the back of a test where they absolutely dismantled South Africa. So as long as they go into the test with the series alive, which is a big ask because they can only afford to lose 1 more game from now, then the series could go either way. So all's not lost right now. It's tricky. It's much trickier than it could have been, but it's not completely dead yet.
Yeah, I really hope I'm wrong on this, but I fear that because it's a 4-day test, and that regardless of how the series is teed up going into it, one team will be fine with a draw. I do worry that the combination of 4 days and the draw being fine means that actually I think England have no leeway for error now. I think if they lose 1 more game, if they lose on Friday, Australia can lose 3-0 in the T20s, draw the test match and retain the Ashes, and that concerns me. But Kathy, if you're looking for reasons to be optimistic, it felt exactly the same pretty much in 2023 at this point. England lost a test match, so we're 4-0 down. But it was also the manner in which they lost a test match. It was a missed opportunity. They will feel that they should have won that game. And they managed to turn it around, which at the time, very few people thought they could do, but they did do it.
Yeah, arguably it's a carbon copy, right? So they were 4-0 down in 2023, and then they went 6-0 down. So arguably it was going worse for them after 2 games in 2023 than it is after 2 games now. Admittedly, the test is worth more. It did kind of have 2023 feels about it yesterday, because I was at that test match in 2023 and it really felt like England could win it right up until the final session of the penultimate day when they started to collapse. They weren't chasing a ridiculous total, and that's kind of similar to what happened yesterday. So maybe that is a kind of turning point to come back in the series, and maybe that is a motivator that they've come back from worse before. We've spoken about it that Nat Sciver-Brunt played a massive role in coming back in that series. She did ridiculous things and was able to, and that was a massive part of why they were able to come back. But there's no reason why someone shouldn't stand up and do that again. And this is a potentially weaker Australia side than we're here in 2023. So there are reasons to be cheerful and reasons to believe that England can pull it back. And especially if they win that ODI tomorrow, then it's game on, really.
Yeah, I think for me, but before I go to Ben for more reasons of optimism, I'll give you a reason for pessimism. As I think that actually the pitches have sort of suited England. I think that Aussie batters, I think, probably thrive a little bit more on the traditional Aussie pitches, and I think the pitches bring in one of England's biggest strengths as a side, and that's the quality of their spin. And you know, the pitch in the second game brings in England's sixth bowler. And one of England's weaknesses as a side is their bowling depth. And in that instance, because of conditions, Capsey comes into it. On a more traditional Aussie pitch, you probably think she doesn't play as big a role. But reason for optimism, Ben, Lauren Bell is bowling so well. There's been so much chat in 2024 about how England are remodelling her action. They're trying to make her a different type of bowler. Lauren, who's not on this week's show, she's actually said a few times, she's wondered, well, why tinker with Bell's stock delivery? She hoops the ball in. That's so difficult for right-handers to play. But actually, she's got more in her armoury at the moment, and she's bowling with really good pace, and she's sustaining it. She looks like a proper attack leader at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like, my fear was partly similar to Lauren's, but also that even if that was a project that could work, that this might come just like a fraction too early for it to happen. But actually, she is just piecing it all together. I mean, we saw, I think in the first ODI, her figures were slightly deflated, I guess is the way to put it, because Australia was just scoring so naturally quickly against the other bowlers, and they were not chasing huge total, so they didn't need to go looking for anything against Bell. But actually, if they had needed to go looking for it, I don't know if they would have found it, because also it's the height as well. I think is that it's not like she's getting that 5 levels of pace, but that height makes it so much harder to drive anything that's not like half volley full. It kind of just say like complete bowler, because the thing, if you have such good in-swing, it is obviously a weapon, but the very best players, if they know what you're going to do, they will likely be able to find a way to diffuse it. If you have several things you can do, if you have, an outswing, if you've got that pace which seems to be sort of ticking up, then yeah, that is really good. And I think we have seen some good stuff from Filer as well. I mean, we mentioned that McGrubble, but that aimward movement that she's getting, it's almost like she's worked on. She's becoming more like Lauren Bell, and Bell's trying to become more like Filer, and then it is sort of
they're
working.
going to end up being the same bowler.
Possibly. I mean, that would be great if you could combine just the absolute best of both of them and have two. That would be an attack that could take 20 wickets, even if they absolutely roll out.
And our next weekly show will be after the first T20. Katya, this iteration of England are arguably a better T20 side, partly because of what we were saying earlier about their mantra fits T20 cricket better.
Yeah, it does. I mean, if you look across both formats, England's run rate or average run rate has crept up massively since John Lewis took over. But in T20s, that's even more exaggerated. I think their average runs per wicket since John Lewis taken over is the best of anyone in the world, whereas still they're second to Australia in ODIs. And T20 is just such a more volatile format, and you can easily see England sneaking at least 2 out of those 3 T20s against Australia in their current iteration. I mean, we've talked a lot about the T20 World Cup, but England did play pretty well for the majority of that T20 World Cup. Obviously, that half an hour against the West Indies will always be the thing that we remember, but they did play very well in that T20 World Cup, and all of their focus for the last 12 months has been on the T20 format. So realistically, that's the format they should be best at the minute. I think it'll be interesting to see what Australia do. I mean, if they get Georgia Vol into that side for the T20s, we know Georgia Vol is in incredible form at the minute. And Australia are a really, really dangerous side when they get going in T20s. So if England can kind of keep them down and from early on, if they let them get any sniff in the first T20, I think that's kind of curtains. But if they can keep on top from an early point and keep dominant on it, then I think, you know, they could sneak that T20 series.
I think Australia are also weaker in T20s than they are in ODIs as well. Like and actually almost for the opposite reasons to why England are perhaps stronger in T20s, and that Australia have this game plan about, like in ODIs, it feels like a lot about like control and about just letting that dominance that they have kind of show itself. That's hard to do in T20 cricket because it's volatile, and I think sometimes they can kind of be wrestling with that a bit. And I think sometimes also actually they always have too many all-rounders to know what to do within T20s, where in ODIs it just gives them such incredible batting depth, and you are probably going to need most of that all of the time. But you saw in the T20 World Cup, they were doing weird things with their batting order because they were like, how can we get value out of these different players, when actually that meant that, you know, their best and most explosive players were just not facing the balls that they need to. And that was one of the things that cost them in that semi-final. So I think that, yeah, Australia will still go into that T20 series as favourites for that series. But if you're looking for reasons for optimism, there are some more, I guess.
Yeah, and on Australian ODIs, I don't think they have the batting depth they used to. They don't have a gun all-rounder at 8 anymore. Litchfield's looked scratchy. Gardner is potentially a spot high at 6. She's got an amazing ODI record. Her strike rate is brilliant. But in the last 13 months, it's not actually as good as it used to be, both in terms of volume of runs, but also how quickly she's scoring. Talia McGrath, not in great nick as well at 7. So, yeah, I don't think Australia have quite the same depth as they've had in the past. There was some chat on the Patreon channel about how England, this is from listener Vanny, who says that England arguably should have broken up the Knight-Lewis axis after the T20 World Cup. This is absolutely huge the next 5 days, because if it doesn't go well, it's quite hard to see England not making a change in at least one of those departments. And probably you'd say Lewis is under more pressure than Knight at the moment.
Yeah, probably. I think from more of a point that there isn't an obvious candidate to replace Knight as captain, and Knight has been in that setup for so long as such an authoritative figure. I've always thought the Knight-Lewis dynamic is a slightly odd one.
How so?
Given that Lewis wants England to play in a way that isn't Knight's natural game, and also is very big on having all England players having freedom off the field, and big on players making their own decisions, and you feel like Knight is a bit more of a kind of someone who wants to be in control of that side. And I think obviously both approaches have their merits, but I've always thought that they're kind of opposites in the way that they think about the game and they think about leadership. Perhaps I'm completely wrong. That's hypothesizing here. But I think it is huge. Lewis came in with this kind of guys to shake the team up after a period of kind of stagnation. And initially he did that. You look at the 2023 T20 World Cup, England come out and they're dynamic, they're scoring quickly. They reach the semi-finals in that tournament, and they go out in that semi-final to South Africa, which didn't feel like the end of the world, because it felt like there was an injection of fresh mindset into this side, and that they were playing T20 cricket in a completely different way to what any women's side is doing at that point. And it also came only a few months into his tenure, so you're not really expected to win it at that point. But over the last kind of 12 months, it feels like there has been this stagnation. And that if they don't manage to win this Ashes series that was billed as kind of the culmination of these efforts after the T20 World Cup, it's like, well, you've lost the T20 World Cup, but there's still another chance to win something with the Ashes. It feels like that there has to be a change after that again to again inject that freshness into the side. And I guess Lewis is under more pressure as the less established figure in women's cricket than Knight, but Knight has been in charge of this side for such a long time now. There has to be some kind of succession planning, whether that's now or whether that's later. There does need to be some kind of succession planning, so that is something to think about.
I still think that actually England's lack of leadership more generally on the field that was so obviously on display in the game against West Indies at the World Cup. You can't not have Knight as your captain, and it's not her fault that there's a lack of leadership shown elsewhere at times. But I think England can lose the Ashes and Lewis keep his job and rightly keep his job. It's more that this tour could seriously unravel, and given the proximity of the T20 World Cup just gone, it's like if this is a shellacking, then I don't think that he can stay in a way that it really could go. And I think also we talked about the schedule for this series. And I think the schedule actually makes it harder for a side that's behind. There's such quick turnaround, so much travel time between games as well, that if you're behind, I can see how it can unravel more dramatically than a tour in England where the Ashes last time was a bit longer, the travel time a bit less.
It's just worth quickly saying on Knight that I think her captaincy on the field has been excellent over the last couple of games and in the T20 World Cup as well. I think the way that she has used the spinners particularly is really, really good. And it's not a criticism of Knight to say that pressure's mounting on her, because her captaincy has been excellent.
Yeah. The Ashes isn't the only international series happening at the moment. I think Ireland and India are playing as we speak. I think it's still 2-0, but it will definitely be 3-0 by the time this podcast comes out. In the third game, the one that's happening as we record, India scored 435 from their 50 overs, the fourth highest women's ODI score ever. And they've potentially unearthed a new exciting batting talent in Pratika Rawal, who scored 154 in this game and now has 444 ODI runs from her first 6 games. Ben, she's not a name that followers of even the WPL will be aware of.
Yeah, no, she's not played a WPL game, which I guess speaks to that tournament's sort of being in its infancy in terms of developing players, but also I think some of the premium around spots there that actually you have to be pretty highly regarded to get into an 11 there, even because there's not that many teams, there's a lot of overseas spots, that kind of thing. But also I think it looks like from her domestic record overall that she is just more suited to one-day cricket in particular as well. So it might be that it takes a little while for her to play T20 cricket, but she's coming to this with nothing. She's been one of Delhi's best players she's been Delhi's best player for a little while, having she was at Railways, which started out in 2021, then moved to Delhi, racked up runs for them in their domestic tournament. Looks like she's one of those people as well who is just frustratingly good at everything. She won a basketball national junior gold medal and also aced her school exams. So she's pretty talented. But yeah, and so she's got 250 in this series, and then this massive 100, but also a 50 against West Indies in terms of doing against, I guess, a slightly higher caliber of opposition.
How does academic achievements become public?
I don't know.
I don't know what Charlie Dean got in her GCSEs, and people don't talk about that.
Do you want to know?
Why do people know what Rawal got in whatever exam she did?
It's good, maybe because she did well. Like I feel like you could probably find out what Zafar Ansari got at Cambridge in his degree.
Yeah.
But you couldn't, I remember because Rocky Flintoff's GCSE results came out on the day that he
made his first class debut.
Yeah, exactly. And I texted that media manager saying can I ask just what results you get? And he was like, I'm just not going to disclose that. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe Rocky Star got all 9s. Is that what it is these days?
I don't know.
In all fairness to Rocky Flintoff, he was playing a lot of cricket during when his GCSE should have been.
That's a good point. Yeah. And then her dad's an umpire?
Yes. Yeah. Level 2 umpire in the BCCI system. So, yeah.
One to look
in
out,
the blood. Yeah.
One to look out for as well. Anyway, that is everything for today's show. We'll be back for our next daily episode after the third ODI. Remember, you can listen to the full daily episodes over on our Patreon. Part 1 goes up to everyone. Part 2 is just on the old Patreon.